Is braided fishing line the right choice for you? What are the advantages and disadvantages of braided fishing line? Hey, I'm Captain Joseph Rains, and today I want to discuss braided fishing line and how it can help you and how it hurts you. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors, St. Pete Fishing Outfitters, Tampa Fishing Outfitters, Tarpon Fishing Outfitters. It's the place to get fitted to fish. Go by there at checkout when you're shopping for tackle, and you'll get a discount on your purchase. If you have a company in construction or manufacturing, call Mitchell at the Pike Consulting Group for your free safety consultation. They'll help keep your workers safe and OSHA compliant. Now let's get into braided line. What are the main advantages of braided line? The number one advantage of braided line is you get a lightweight, thin line comparable to the same break strength monofilament. That's a really cool feature of this line. So because it's so light and so thin, next advantage, I can cast it further. That's really cool. So 15-pound braid is going to cast further than 15-pound mono. It's just a fact. It's less mass, it's thin, it's going to cast a lot easier. The next main advantage, because it's so thin, you're going to fit more on your fishing reel. That really ups the ante when you're out fishing for stuff like king mackerel or tarpon. Fast moving fish that can take a lot of line, braid line can definitely come in handy. And that's going to allow you to use lighter, smaller tackle because you've raised your line capacity on your reel. Finally, an added benefit of braided line is the fact that it has a lot of sensitivity transfer. So when you get a bite using braided line, you can feel a lot of what's going on down there. Some disadvantages of braided fishing line are, number one, because it's so light and thin, it's thinner than its comparable break strength mono, it doesn't hold up to abrasion very well. So any rocks, oysters, anything like that, it's gonna cut right through that, no problem. And I've experienced that many times. We use a monofilament or fluorocarbon leader to tie off to our hook. We connect that to the braid, and although that's not invincible, anytime anything rough gets near that braid, it's popped, it's done. So that is a main disadvantage of braided line. Another disadvantage of braided line is its tendency to get tangled and twisted with poor management. If you're inexperienced with braid or you're an inexperienced fisherman, then you're going to have a lot of issues with braided line. You've got to make sure your braided line gets onto the spool correctly. You've got to make sure you're not getting much line twist in your braided line. You've got to make sure that you're managing your casts. You got to make sure how this line is flying off the reel, how it's coming back onto the reel. Any actions, any casts that create excess line, excess limp line coming back onto the spool is a recipe for disaster. Line twist and limp line is definitely going to cause what's called a wind knot. Wind often creates excess line flying off your spool, and when you reel, it comes back on in not the tightest way. So you get loose wraps on there, and eventually you get this funky, uneven wrap on the spool, and when you go to cast, it flies off strange, and you get this big bird nest. So again, when you add line twist into the mix with that, you're really, really hurting. So wind knots, bird nests, they're all part of fishing with braided line, and even the most seasoned braided line fishermen might get them every now and then. Be sure to watch out for those line snapbacks. If you hang up in the trees in the mangroves or the weeds or wherever you fish and you pop a line, braided line is going to come flying back at you, and it may end up in a big jumble all over your fishing rod, over your reel, over your head, and that often turns into a knot, and sometimes you can't fix it and you lose that line. So that's really annoying. You're picking through knots when you do that. And the style of fishing that we do over here in Tampa Bay and in the mangrove zone in Florida, we're flipping under those mangroves a lot, and sometimes you miss and sometimes you end up in the trees and you got to pop your line. And that all ends up back on top of you. So that's very frustrating, and that's something that you have to deal with braided line. Another disadvantage of braided line is its tendency to be a little bit aggravating when you're trying to tie knots with it, especially the really thin stuff. So if you're a braided line fisherman, you probably know that at some point you got cut in the creases of your finger or somewhere on your hand when you're trying to tie a knot with braided line. that's something you got to watch out for. Personally, braided line makes a big difference. I want a little bit extra casting distance. I want a small, lightweight, thin line that flies off the spool easily, and I can cast live baits into tight corners. I need just a couple of extra feet to make the difference, and I think this braided line works. In other situations, I want line capacity. I'm fighting big, strong fish that make big, powerful runs, and I don't want to use the heaviest of heavy gear to get the line capacity. I want to use some smaller gear that honestly is more standard now, but has the oomph and has the line capacity when using braided line to land them. I hope this video has helped you decide whether braided line is for you. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. Check out our sponsors, and I'll see you later.
If you have OSHA compliance questions or concerns, Pike Group's got you covered.